Hello everybody, I'm Terry Ryder from Hotspotting, and here's the good news from today and indeed the past couple of days. And let's face it, there's no shortage of it. Now here's what one report, not from mainstream media, on Australian real estate said today. It said interest in Australia's real estate market is up almost 50% on this time last year, despite the challenges and uncertainty of the coronavirus pandemic. It said confident buyers are flooding the market as it defies the COVID-19 economic downturn and shows early signs of helping to propel the nation out of our pandemic-enforced recession. Prospective buyers have adapted smoothly to the new digitised ways of doing business as they continue to search for their new home. Dwelling prices are holding firm, and another sign that Australia will avoid a property market crash due to the coronavirus that was predicted to be as great as a 30% price fall. Now, what's all that based on? Well, according to data released by the property platform realestate.com.au, searches for properties in New South Wales are up 39% on the same time last year. And in Victoria, searches are 40% greater than in mid-2019. In Queensland, it's lifted 33%, and in South Australia, it's up 40%. It's a strong indication of Australia's faith and confidence in our property market, in stark contrast to the volatility of the Australian Stock Exchange. Realestate.com.au chief economist Ryder said, "The buying side of the market is holding up a lot better than I expected. We expected to see the search activity to continue to drop off as a result of COVID-19. But what we saw instead was that the first 2 weeks of the downturn in late March, there was a dramatic fall off. But since then, we've seen an enormous pickup in searches. The market is very active." Now, another significant outcome for real estate, the decision to lift restrictions on public auctions and open houses in New South Wales has been welcomed, not surprisingly, by the property industry. Sellers in the country's largest property market will join the Northern Territory next weekend in having the option of holding traditional public auctions and open homes for inspection. Last week, Western Australia eased the rules to open houses up to 6 people, the first moves to reopen the property industry after 6 weeks of restriction. The restart comes after property researcher CoreLogic reported the strongest preliminary auction clearance rate since the bans were put in place. Almost 60% of the 590 properties put on the auction block nationally last weekend through digital means sold on the back of lower withdrawal numbers. Now, all those numbers about real estate are extraordinary, particularly when considered alongside the price data for April, which showed rises in prices slightly in most cities and most regional markets. Now, as mentioned, open house inspections and in-person auctions are back in full swing in the Northern Territory, with agents welcoming potential buyers back from the virtual world. The Chief Minister, Michael Gunner, announced this week that restrictions had been lifted on in-person auctions and open houses as part of the Territory Government's significant rollback of its coronavirus restriction measures. Now, similar moves are expected soon in Queensland, although Victoria continues to oppose these kinds of relaxations of restrictions. Now, South Australia will be the first state to unshackle itself of onerous coronavirus restrictions, committing to a significant loosening of the lockdown within weeks, ahead of the more populous eastern states. South Australia has notched its 13th straight day without any new cases of COVID-19, giving the Premier Stephen Marshall and his medical chiefs further impetus to push ahead with returning life to normal by May 21. Restrictions on the use of playgrounds, school attendance, amateur sport, outdoor dining, beer gardens are amongst the next clamps to be considered for removal in South Australia as the state readies itself to emerge from lockdown. South Australia has been the freest jurisdiction in the nation during the pandemic, yet there are now only 5 active cases of the virus in South Australia. And I continue to be a big fan of the Australian real estate market, and I think the South Australian economy is hugely underrated. And this week's announcements means that this economy can move into recovery stronger and faster than the other states, and its real estate market will benefit from that. Now, as we slowly emerge from the shutdown phase across Australia, and as property continues to show its resilience, one of the likely outcomes is going to be a shortage of homes. Now, coming into the virus crisis, the nation had very low vacancies, low levels of listings of property for sale, and relatively low levels of construction of new dwellings, and this is being exacerbated by the economic downturn. Master Builders Australia says that up to 43,000 new homes will not be built in the coming year because of the coronavirus downturn, according to its modelling. And Master Builders Chief Danita Warren says, we previously forecast that there would be around 159,000 new housing commencements in the financial year 2021. We now expect there will only be around 116,000, a drop of 27%. Now, the amount of new homes required in Australia each year to house population growth is about 200,000, according to Master Builders. So the pre-coronavirus forecast was already 41,000 short, and now that deficit will blow out to 84,000 homes short of what we need. And one of the outcomes of that will be upward pressure on prices. Now, looking at some of the recent market action around the country, they're saying Kilda West House has smashed the price record, selling for 11.7 million in a deal that was finalised a few months ago, but has only just settled in the last week. 2 blocks from the beach, the home is on a parcel of almost 1,000 square metres. It fixed the top price in a quiet off-market sale. The previous top price for that suburb was 7.5 million set in 2018. Also in Melbourne, developer Tim Gurner has settled $180 million worth of apartments in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. The settlements occurred across 2 completed inner suburban projects. Hawkesburn Place residences in upmarket Prahran comprised 21 penthouse-style apartments, all of which have settled. And the Albert Place residences in South Melbourne comprised 142 apartments, of which 122 have settled, according to reports. Now, in terms of stimulus spending from government, cash flow payments worth more than $6 billion have been provided to hundreds of thousands of small and medium-sized businesses under the federal government's COVID-19 stimulus packages. Since the Prime Minister announced the cash flow assistance measures last month, payments have been delivered to over 343,000 businesses. Under the Business Support Program, the government is providing tax-free cash flow boosts of between $20,000 and $100,000 to eligible businesses and not-for-profits, delivered through credits in the activity statement system. The Prime Minister says the payments, providing cash flow to keep businesses operating, pay their rent and retain their staff, has helped employers stay afloat during the pandemic economic shock. In New South Wales, Premier Gladys Berejiklian has announced the first 24 projects that will undergo a fast-tracked assessment process as part of the New South Wales Government's new Planning System Acceleration Program. The 24 projects identified to be fast-tracked have the potential to create almost 9,500 new jobs during construction and once complete, inject $7.5 billion into the state's economy, deliver more than 325,000 square metres of new public open space, parks and environmental conservation lands, and allow more than 4,400 new homes to be built, including 1,000 social and affordable homes. Now, one major project that is approved to go ahead is the master-planned Ivanhoe Estate in Macquarie Park. Planning Minister Rob Stokes says the approval paved the way for construction to begin, and this will inject $300 million into the state's economy and provide 572 jobs. He says this approval paves the way for construction to begin on the first 2 residential buildings, which will deliver 740 new homes, with about 1/3 for social housing. The federal government will boost the manufacturing industry's recovery from the COVID-19 crisis for nearly $50 million, going into 220 different projects across the country. Industry, Science and Technology Minister Karen Andrews has announced the government fund will boost projects which are worth a combined $215 million nationally, and these projects are expected to create more than 2,600 jobs. Looking at infrastructure projects that have been advanced in the last few days, the French clean energy developer Nuon plans to build the world's largest battery near Geelong, pitching it as the cheapest way to manage increased demand during extreme periods like summer, when the grid is under the most strain and at risk of blackout. This $300 million battery will be capable of generating 600 megawatts of power, 4 times the size of Tesla's big battery in the Hornsdale wind farm in South Australia. Now, we don't see much in media about alternative energy projects around Australia, but this is a huge industry that involves many billions of dollars in investment, which is happening right now. In Western Australia, the environmental regulator has approved a huge wind and solar farm project in Western Australia's northwest that will include more than 1,700 wind turbines, each of them 260 metres high. The Environmental Protection Authority says its approval of the proposed $22 billion Asian renewable energy hub is centred on a site 220 kilometres east of Port Hedland, and also will have 2,000 megawatts of solar power capacity. Now, construction of a major wind farm is planned for the Tablelands area in Queensland, and it will start sooner than originally thought after being given the green light by the federal government. The Department of Environment has granted approval to French company Nuon's Green Power Hub near Ravenshoe, a $300 million initiative. The energy project is to include 29 wind turbines, a substation, battery storage, etc., to provide energy for the national energy market. This Green Power Hub will generate more than 400,000 megawatt hours of clean energy to the national grid each year, enough to power about 88,000 homes. In New South Wales, the Byalla wind farm has installed the first of its 31 wind turbines for the project, which is located in the Southern Highlands. And in Tasmania, the $280 million Granville Harbour wind farm has reached a major milestone with the completion of the big moves of wind farm components from Burnie to the farm. This is another step forward towards reaching the Tasmanian First energy policy to make the state fully renewable and self-sufficient by 2022. And also in Tasmania, the environmental watchdog has ticked off on a wind farm project in the state's northwest. This is for UPC Renewables Jims Plains Energy Park project to be built on the mainland and also Robbins Island. It involves the construction of 31 wind turbines. A solar array is also planned along with the substation. Now, in Queensland, the final turbine, which will be for a short time at least Australia's largest wind farm, has been installed at the 450 megawatt Cooper's Gap project, about 250 kilometres northwest of Brisbane. AGL Energy's head of construction, Brian McAvoy, said the final blade of the 123rd GE wind turbine had been hoisted into place and fitted to the turbine. And while it's far and away the largest wind farm in Queensland so far, it will soon be picked as the largest in Australia by Goldwind's 530 megawatt Stockyard Hill project, which has just this week kicked off the commissioning process, and that one's near Ballarat, I think. Looking at other infrastructure projects, preparation works are already underway for next month's construction start for the $176 million Cairns Convention Centre project, expansion project. There's a lot riding on the schedule, staying on track, both to prop up the construction industry in Cairns and to allow business tourism to bounce back after the coronavirus travel bans have been lifted. In New South Wales, the New England Highway has been upgraded around Scone with a bypass which wraps up 6 months of construction. Deputy Prime Minister Michael McCormack says the finishing work on the $137 million project has now been officially completed. This section of the New England Highway carries 8,500 vehicles a day, which no longer have to travel through the centre of Scone to get where they want to go, and around 1,150 direct and indirect jobs were supported during the building of the bypass, which has been underway for the last 2 years. Contracts have been awarded for the $850 million Bunbury Outer Ring Road, the biggest ever transport project in the southwest of New South Wales. This project includes the remaining stages of the 4-lane, 27-kilometre link between the Forest and Bustle highways. So lots of big projects happening infrastructure-wise around the country. And in terms of property developments, a $1 billion development promising jobs, highway upgrades and new water supply is going to be happening in Bowen in the Whitsundays region of Queensland. Proposed $1.1 billion Whitsunday Paradise development is proposing a 10-stage development over 20 years, building 1,700 residences, lots of units, an AFL field and a service centre about 10 kilometres from Bowen. And we'll also spend $40 million on immediate upgrades to the Bruce Highway and to Bowen's water and sewerage infrastructure. In the Sydney region, a master planned residential estate filled with close to 600 homes in a rural community in the Hawkesbury region is one step closer to becoming a reality. after council submitted plans to be decided on by the New South Wales Planning Department. The Celestino planning proposal will transform 11 rural properties into hundreds of homes in the Jacaranda Ponds estate at Glassodia. In Brisbane, the next stage of a $1.2 billion master plan community in Brisbane's eastern suburbs is underway, delivering a boost to local construction in the Queensland capital. Mirvac has started construction of Tulloch House, the $77 million second stage of the master plan development within the Eagle Farm Racecourse precinct, which will have 1,300 workers on site at various times throughout the construction period until late 2021. And also in Brisbane, construction has started on one of Brisbane's largest speculative industrial projects. Developer Dexus has kicked off the first stage of its $100 million Freeman Central estate at Richlands in Brisbane South. More than 300 jobs will be created in the first stage of that project. In Melbourne, a $180 million green tower is set to revitalise part of central Melbourne, described by one councillor as the city's sleaziest. The 42-storey project in Lonsdale Street will have offices in the bottom half of the building, and the top half will have a 288-room hotel. Also in central Melbourne, Multiplex has completed a $350 million high-rise residential development called Swanston Central, delivering a new addition to Melbourne's inner-city skyline. It's located on the former Carlton United Brewery site in Victoria Street in Carlton, and the 71-level Swanston Central has over 1,000 residential apartments. And a giant 5-tower retirement village is planned for a site of the former Gold Coast markets, and it's aiming to get approval this month. Gold Coast councillors will consider Reside Communities' plans to build towers of up to eight levels on a 3.5-hectare Hope Island site, which was once home to Village Square. Now, as the final word today, let's look at how Australian news media reports the real estate market and how much it differs from fact and reality. One of the biggest stories in the past few days has been the publication of price data for the month of April. Now, if you remember a month earlier when the price data for March was published, the figures showed that virtually every city and regional market showed solid rises in March. But most media said, yeah, but the figures are irrelevant because they predate the full impact of the virus shutdowns. Wait until next month, they said, when we get the figures for April, and they then predicted a massive collapse in property values by then. Well, on Friday, the figures for April were published, and they showed that nationally, house prices had risen again, a little. And that prices rose to some degree in 6 of the 8 capital cities and 6 of the 7 regional markets. So absolutely no sign at all of the major collapse in property values that media had predicted a month earlier. The only major market that showed any decline at all in April was the Melbourne house market, although Melbourne apartment prices rose. So what did the media headlines say? Did they say house prices rise in defiance of dire forecast? No. Did they say house prices rise in almost all major markets across Australia? No. The headline said Melbourne house prices fall in April. And another one said Melbourne prices fall, Sydney loses steam. And one particularly scurrilous headline screamed, Australia's property market collapses. Outrageous. The journalists who perpetrate these dishonest and pathetically negative headlines and articles should be ashamed of themselves. But I suspect they won't be because they think it's good journalism. It's all about creating clickbait headlines. And if the words are misleading or fraudulent, well, who cares? That's it for today. Let's talk again soon. Terry Ryder from Hotspotting signing off for now. Let's do it again tomorrow.